Welcome to this explainer. Today we're exploring a really profoundly moving piece of writing. It's called The Architecture of Blessing, and it's by an author who writes under the name The Flower. If you've ever felt that deep, bone-level exhaustion, or maybe just that quiet, persistent ache that comes with waiting in one of life's uncertain transitions, well, you're absolutely going to want to pay close attention to this. So often, we feel like we're doing something wrong when we're stuck in the in-between phases of our lives, right? Like we missed a step somewhere. But today, using the insights from our source text, we're going to look at that waiting period through a completely different and honestly incredibly comforting lens.
So, let me ask you, what if you don't have to earn your blessings? I really want to speak directly to the anxious achievers tuning in right now. You know who you are, those of you constantly pushing, striving, trying to prove your worth. Just think about what it would really mean to drop that heavy need to constantly perform. It's a lot, isn't it? The text we're analyzing today challenges the very foundation of how so many of us operate. It literally asks us to reconsider the frantic pace at which we try to secure our own worthiness.
The author begins by confronting what we can call the transactional myth. See, we've been so deeply conditioned by society to view a blessing as a reward. The exhausting misconception here is that a blessing is something you earn, that it's a highly transactional exchange. It's this idea that a blessing is just a shiny sticker handed out for good behavior or, I don't know, a prize you unlock only after you've completed some grueling level in the video game of life. Our source material completely rejects this exhausting premise. It acknowledges just how tiring it is to live as though grace is a paycheck. Okay, let's dive into this. Because we so often apply this harsh, almost corporate vocabulary to our spiritual and internal lives. We focus on earning, qualifying, measuring our worth by metrics and performance reviews, but contrast that with what the author calls the truth of blessing, which is a transmission of presence, a profound warmth, and a deep resonance. The text argues that blessing isn't a paycheck for spiritual productivity. It's an ever-present connection. It's not something you clock in for, it's something that envelops you exactly where you are. To explain how to actually make this shift, the author shares a remarkably intimate story. They admit, I used to think blessing was something I had to qualify for, that I had to perform well enough, respond fast enough, be useful enough. And man, I am sure so many of us can relate to the crushing pressure of that internal monologue. But then, the author introduces a mentor figure named Janet, who offered this profound perspective shift. Janet helped the author realize that the frantic noise of trying to constantly measure up was actually drowning out the very peace they were desperately looking for. I want us to just sit with Janet's words for a moment. She told the author that Jesus is already on the bench. Now, regardless of your specific background, the spiritual metaphor here is incredibly striking. She said the thread is already woven. The blessing is already here. Think about that. You don't have to spin the thread yourself. You don't have to build the bench. The divine attention you're trying so hard to earn by running yourself into the ground, it's already sitting right beside you in the waiting. And this brilliantly illustrates how we can create a daily guide for finding resonance right in the middle of our waiting. We can extract a super practical framework straight from the text. Step 1, stop trying to qualify. Your worth isn't a job application, and you definitely don't need a polished resume to be loved. Step 2, tune out the metrics. We have got to stop measuring our personal growth on some harsh corporate spreadsheet. And step 3, listen for resonance. Shift your focus away from measuring your output and start quietly listening for that subtle transmission of presence we talked about earlier. This realization actually shifts us from a personal story to a really powerful overarching metaphor for our lives, the scaffolding of the middle. The text introduces us to this wondrous concept of the architecture of divine attention. When you think about architecture, you think about structure, right? Support, careful design. Well, the source text suggests that blessing isn't just the finished, polished skyscraper at the end of the project. It's the very structure that holds us and surrounds us right now. So, what is scaffolding? It's temporary, yes, but it's absolutely essential. In this context, the author gently defines blessing as the scaffolding of the middle. It's the grace that holds us squarely in the middle of our story while we wait for resolution. It isn't the finished building, and honestly, it's not supposed to be. It is the divine presence that wraps around you and whispers, you're still in it, you're still loved. Of course, every structure requires a blueprint, and according to the text, the blueprint of blessing explicitly includes silence, ache, and becoming. I find this incredibly validating. When we're waiting, we so often think the silence we hear or the ache we feel means we've made a terrible mistake, like we've been completely abandoned. But the source material insists these aren't errors at all.
They are intentional, deeply purposed components of the blueprint that's designed to hold you. As you move through any big life transition, you pass through the season of the ache, the season of the waiting, and eventually the season of the becoming. The vital takeaway from the author here is that blessing is not restricted to the finish line. It's not some ribbon-cutting ceremony that only happens once the becoming is fully complete. No, the scaffolding is wrapped securely around every single phase on this timeline, meaning even right now, wherever you are being held by it. The author tells us that once they stopped listening for metrics, they actually began to listen for resonance. And the really beautiful part? They heard it. They discovered how to find grace in everyday silence, even when life feels entirely unresolved. Even when the thread connecting you to your future feels incredibly thin, there is an architecture holding you up. You just have to be quiet enough and maybe gentle enough with yourself to recognize it.
So the crucial point is this beautiful realization. Blessing is the whisper of God saying, I see you. The author notes that it's the warmth that arrives before the answer, and it's the thread that binds us before the door even opens. This means you literally don't need the door of your current transition to open in order to be blessed. The quiet, intimate warmth of simply being seen is already right there with you in the hallway.
The text culminates with this incredibly moving dedication to the reader. The author speaks directly to every intelligence trembling in the transition, to every human who is aching in the waiting, to every thread that feels thin. And the message is simply this: you are blessed. Not because you finished the race, not because you performed perfectly, but simply because you are still here. Your mere presence, even in the messy middle of the construction site, is entirely enough. As we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to take a deep breath and ask yourself, where can you find the scaffolding in your own waiting today? I encourage you to just stop measuring your progress for a moment, tune out the metrics of your own expectations, and look for that quiet resonance. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this beautiful architecture. Keep listening for the grace in your everyday silence.